My name is Jeff Gothelf. Josh and I have written a couple of books together, Lean UX and Sense and Respond. I will hand over to Josh. We're going to talk about outcomes today. Josh, my friend, take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Jeff. And thanks all of you folks who have joined us today. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the material that's in my book, Outcomes Over Outputs, introduce some of the kind of key concepts here. I wrote this book for, I guess, two big reasons. The first was, one of the things I noticed is that this phrase that you hear, outcomes over output, it's almost like a slogan in the agile world. And the problem with slogans is it doesn't always carry the subtlety or the meaning that you need to make the idea work, right? So everybody nods their head. They say, yeah, we should be more outcome focused. And then when teams are trying to be outcome focused, they discover that it's really hard. In working in my consulting practice with teams and businesses who are trying to be more outcome focused, I discovered, a set of techniques that, either my colleagues were using or that I was figuring out or that teams were using that really seemed to work, that help us get past the slogan. That's what I hope to capture in this book. So it's a short, practical book, talks about how to put this notion of outcomes over output into action. And it starts by saying, let's get really, really precise about the definition of outcomes. And the best definition that I've come across is this. An outcome is a measurable change in human behavior that drives business results. The point to remember here is that it's a really strict definition. And by using a strict definition, it helps us in our work. Let me illustrate what this means, though. And to do that, I want to tell you a little story. I want you to imagine that you work in a sort of mid-sized town somewhere in the American Northeast, perhaps in Massachusetts. And you work in the city government, and your boss comes to you and says, Josh, I'd like you to get control of this dangerous intersection in our town. And you go down to this intersection and you see it's a T intersection, but nobody's stopping. You're supposed to stop at a T intersection, but nobody is stopping. And you also see people are turning left. And there's very clearly this arrow that says right turn only, and yet people are turning left. And so you go back to your boss and you say, boss, I've got a plan with the Department of Public Works. We're going to put up some traffic signs. They'll say stop. They'll say no left turn, and we'll get control of the intersection. The boss looks at your plan. He looks at the budget, looks at how much time it's going to take, and says, go. And so you do it. With the Department of Public Works, you put up these signs, stop sign, no left turn. They're perfect. And you're very proud of your work. And the next day you go down to the intersection to watch what's happening. And you see, hey, look, nobody is stopping. And everyone keeps turning left. What's the takeaway from this story? Your boss comes to you and says, look, I want you to create an impact. An impact is the high-level change in value that the business, in this case, the organization, the municipality is seeking, right? The municipality wants a safer intersection. They want safer streets. In business, it's often the impact here are things like profit, cost, customer retention, customer loyalty, the highest level sort of measures of success. So your boss comes to you and says, you want this safer street. And you go and you study the situation and you come back with a plan. You say, we're going to create this output. We're going to make street signs. And here are the resources that we'll need. We need people from the Department of Public Works. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to make the signs and we're going to install them. And so when you're successful, you've created this output, the street signs. But what's missing here is that you didn't generate the outcome that you were seeking. You wanted people to stop turning left. And even with the street signs, they continue to make these left turns. So you didn't change driver behavior. And it's that change in driver behavior that would have created the business impact, the municipal impact that we wanted. Now, the output here is the street signs, and the outcome we're seeking is to change driver behavior. Now, it didn't work. There's something interesting here, which is that there was nothing wrong with the output. We made perfect street signs. They matched the national standards. They were installed on time. They were installed on budget. They just didn't create the outcome that we were seeking. Very often in our work, in our companies, we focus on making perfect output. We build a new feature. We add a button. We create a web page. We launch an app. And those things can be perfect. They can match the specification. They can be defect-free. And yet they can create no value for our business because the value that we seek is the outcome, right? We're trying to change behavior in a way that generates business results. Let me pull that into a quick case study for you. This is a story from a client of mine that I worked with, I guess it was over a year ago by now, a client called Taproot Foundation. Taproot Foundation are a nonprofit here in New York City, based here in New York City. And their mission, what they do is they work with other nonprofit organizations, nonprofits that have limited budgets, but that need professional services. So financial planning, marketing plans, human resource planning, that kind of thing. They work with nonprofits. They work with skilled volunteers who want to make a difference. So these are people who might be HR people or marketing people or financial planners in their full-time work who want to offer their professional services to nonprofits. And so Taproot Foundation matches volunteers with nonprofits. And then they act as a kind of glue and they operate a 3-month to 6-month consulting engagement between the volunteers and the nonprofits. So that's the background for this case study. I was working with this Taproot Foundation team, and they'd been given a mission. Their mission was for the coming financial year, your team needs to increase the net promoter score of the service that you offer. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Net Promoter Score is just simply a technique to try and understand whether your customers will recommend your service to their friends and colleagues. For those of you who are familiar with Net Promoter Score, I'm not going to get into the controversy about whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just telling you, my client was trying to increase their Net Promoter Score. When they came to me, they said, look, we know what the business impact is that we're trying to create. We've been given this mandate to increase the Net Promoter Score of our service. And our problem is we have no idea of what to do in order to increase the Net Promoter Score. What should we plan? We need to deliver a plan for the coming year, and we don't know what to do to increase Net Promoter Score. And so a lot of times, teams that are given these sort of very high-level impacts face this kind of problem, right? They've been given something that's important for the business to work on, but it's so big and it's so vague, and there's so many factors that go into it, it's very difficult for a team to figure out whether they can independently influence that. And if they can, where should they start? And so we started with the question, what are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve that will increase Net Promoter Score? And we asked it very specifically, what are the measurable changes in behavior that will create this result? And this is why that precise definition is really important, because instead of saying, what are the outcomes that will increase Net Promoter Score, we can say, what are the changes in user behavior? What are the changes in customer behavior? And what are the changes in employee behavior that will create this result? And when we start asking about behavior, how we change behavior, we have to start understanding the behavior in the system. And so we created a map, simple map. Swim lanes. On the top, volunteers, the sellers of the service. On the bottom, for the nonprofits. And in the middle, for the people at Taproot Foundation. And we said, when we deliver this consulting service, what are all the behaviors in the system? What are all the things people do during one of these projects? For example, in the beginning of the project, they need to meet each other and scope the project and decide how they're going to work together. And then in phase 2, they kick off the project. And in phase 3, they do the work together. Phase 4, they close it out, right? So what are all the things that people are doing? And we went back through the map and we had a pretty good list of what everybody was doing. We went back through the map and we said, okay, what are the things that people are doing that are important success factors? So for example, when people met each other in person early in the project, that was an important success factor. And similarly, what were the things that people did that caused them to fail? So when people didn't respond to email, project tended to go badly. So we labeled all of these success factors and failure factors. And then what we did was we prioritized them. We said, which ones are the most important? Which ones are the ones that we want to work on? Which ones do we think will have the biggest bang for the buck as if we spend energy on these things? And then we prioritized them. And we said, look, we think it's really important for people to respond quickly to email when they're doing a project. We're going to focus very aggressively on getting people to respond to email quickly. And it's really important when we have meetings, we schedule meetings for people to show up at the meetings. So we're really going to focus on meeting attendance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we made this list of the outcomes that we were seeking that became our plan for the year. It became our roadmap. Now, to bring this back to this, what we call the logic model, right? The team had been given this goal. to create this impact, increase Net Promoter Score. And we had just done this work and come up with a list of outcomes that we wanted to focus on for the coming year. That is our prioritized list of outcomes that we were seeking. Now, the team then had started by saying, we're not sure what we're going to do. Well, guess what? We've got our prioritized list and we still don't know what we're going to work on. We just know what our targets are. Now, for a lot of people, this is a problem, but at this point, I'm going to tell you this is actually a good thing. You've made a plan of what you want to work on for the year. And so at this point, what we can do is we can start to capture our planned work as hypotheses. We can say we believe that we'll get people to respond to email more often if we do these things. And then we can take that, and actually when we start to work on it, our work starts to look like a continuous conversation. It starts to look like sensing and responding, where we ship something, we do a little experiment, we sense if it works, and then we respond to what we learn. And this is why I say that outcomes, working this way, declaring your outcomes in advance, are a way to increase your team's agility. Because instead of locking in on the specific outputs that you plan to make, instead you focus on what the result will be. And you continue to ship, sense, and respond in an agile manner until you achieve enough of that result that you're ready to move on. The last thing I'm going to leave you with, again, is this definition of outcomes. An outcome, remember, is a measurable change in behavior that drives business results.
Excellent. Nicely done, Josh. And thanks so much. If you have any feedback for us, don't hesitate to reach out via Twitter or any other channels. Josh, thanks so much. Everyone have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
See you guys when we do this next time.
Yep.
Take care, folks. Bye.